They told me it was just a get-together. Nothing special. No reason for me to come. I believed them because I always tried to believe the best about my family. That afternoon, I drove over anyway, just to drop off a small gift and say hello. I didn't expect anything more than a quick visit. As soon as I turned into the driveway, my chest tightened. There were cars everywhere, parked along the street like it was a major event. A catering van was unloading trays of food. Gold and white balloons were tied to the mailbox, swaying in the air. I slowed down, confused, telling myself I must have the wrong address. But then I saw the banner stretched across the front porch. It read, "Congratulations Emma and Ryan." I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I read the banner again, hoping I had misunderstood. Engagement. Party. Everyone here. Everyone except me. The truth hit me all at once, heavy and sharp. I wasn't invited to my own sister's engagement. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I finally stepped out of the car, my legs feeling weak. Laughter spilled out from the house. I could hear music, glasses clinking, people cheering. It felt wrong, like I was walking into a place I didn't belong. I adjusted the small gift bag in my hands, suddenly feeling foolish for bringing it. Through the window, I saw familiar faces. Aunts, cousins, family friends. People who had watched me grow up. People who knew I existed. No one had thought to tell me the truth. No one had wondered why I wasn't there. That hurt more than the lie itself. When the front door opened, my sister froze. Her smile disappeared for half a second before she forced it back. That moment told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed hard. I refused to cry there, in front of everyone. Inside, people stared, confused by my sudden appearance. I felt like an outsider at a celebration that should have included me from the start. My mind raced with questions I didn't want answers to. How long had this been planned? Who decided I didn't belong? Why was it so easy to leave me out? I stood there, surrounded by noise and joy, yet completely alone. That was when the first sting of betrayal truly sank in. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, deep, and unforgettable. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a party. It was about where I stood in my own family, and how little my absence seemed to matter. Growing up, Emma and I lived under the same roof, ate at the same table, and had the same parents, but our experiences were never the same. From the time we were little, it was clear who stood in the spotlight. Emma was the one everyone praised. Her grades were celebrated, her small achievements turned into family events, and her mistakes were quickly forgiven. I was expected to do well quietly and move on without needing attention. If Emma won something at school, our parents would take us out to dinner. When I achieved something, I was told a simple "that's nice" and reminded not to make a big deal out of it. I learned early that my role was to be understanding, patient, and supportive. I was the older sister, after all. That was always the excuse. When I tried to speak up, my feelings were often brushed aside. If something hurt me, my mother would say I was being too sensitive. My father would tell me to let it go and keep the peace. They never meant to be cruel, but their words taught me a painful lesson. My emotions mattered less, especially when they conflicted with Emma's happiness. Emma learned this too, even if no one ever said it out loud. She grew confident, used to being admired and defended. I grew careful, measuring my words, afraid of being labeled difficult. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness. I told myself that families aren't perfect and that love shows up in different ways. It was easier than facing the truth. At family gatherings, Emma's opinions were always heard first. If she spoke, everyone listened. If I spoke, the conversation moved on quickly. It wasn't dramatic enough to cause a scene, but it was constant. A look ignored. A joke missed. A moment passed over. Small things that added up quietly over the years. I became the reliable one. The one who helped without being asked. The one who showed up early and left late. I thought if I proved my value, things would change. But they never did. Being dependable didn't earn me respect, it only made me easier to overlook. By the time we were adults, this pattern felt normal to everyone except me. I had learned how to swallow disappointment and smile through it. I had learned how to excuse behavior that hurt me because it was easier than rocking the boat. Still, somewhere deep inside, I hoped there was a line that wouldn't be crossed. I had been left out before in small ways. Plans made without me. Decisions discussed after they were already final. But it was always subtle, easy to explain away. Nothing had ever been so clear, so visible, and so undeniable. What happened now felt different. It wasn't just another quiet dismissal. It was a public reminder of where I stood, and it forced me to see a truth I had avoided for far too long. A few weeks before everything happened, Emma mentioned something in passing during a phone call. Her voice was casual, almost bored, like it didn't matter. She said there might be a small family dinner coming up, nothing important, just something simple. She laughed lightly and told me I wouldn't need to come. According to her, it was going to be quiet and short, and she didn't want me to feel pressured to attend. I remember pausing for a moment, holding my phone, unsure how to respond. The way she said it felt off, but I pushed the thought away. I didn't want to sound suspicious or needy. I told her it was fine and that I hoped she enjoyed it. She changed the subject right after, talking about work and other small things, like the conversation before had never happened. What stood out to me later was what she didn't say. She never gave a date. She never mentioned where it would be. There were no details at all, just enough information to explain my absence if I ever asked. At the time, I convinced myself I was reading too much into it. I didn't want to assume the worst about my own sister. A few days later, I ran into our aunt at the grocery store. We chatted briefly, nothing serious, until she smiled and said she was looking forward to seeing me soon. I asked her what she meant. She looked confused and said she thought I'd be at Emma's celebration. The word caught me off guard. Celebration wasn't the same as a small dinner. I asked a few careful questions, trying not to sound alarmed. My aunt mentioned how nice it was that Emma was finally taking this step and how everyone was excited to gather. She didn't seem to realize she was revealing something I wasn't supposed to know. I nodded, kept my face calm, and ended the conversation as quickly as I could. The moment I got into my car, my stomach tightened. Pieces started to fall into place. Emma's vague words, the missing details, the way she brushed it off. My instincts told me something wasn't right. Still, I hesitated. I didn't want to believe she would lie to me so easily. I considered calling Emma to ask directly, but fear stopped me. I worried she would accuse me of making a problem out of nothing. I worried I would be told, once again, that I was overthinking. So I stayed quiet. I chose trust over confrontation, hoping my doubts were wrong. That was the moment the betrayal truly began, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. It started with half-truths and silence, with information carefully shared and carefully hidden. I didn't know the full picture, but deep down, I sensed that something important was happening without me, and that realization hurt more than I wanted to admit. I spent a long time staring at the small gift bag on my kitchen table before I left. Part of me wanted to stay home and ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. Another part told me that showing up with kindness was the right thing to do. No matter what was happening, Emma was still my sister. I told myself I would just drop off the gift, say hello, and leave quietly. The closer I got, the heavier my heart felt. When I arrived, there was no doubt left. The house was alive with energy. Music played loudly, and people stood outside in groups, laughing and talking like they had nowhere else to be. Through the open doors, I could see tables filled with food and drinks. This wasn't a simple dinner. It was a full celebration. I walked inside slowly, feeling like every step took more effort than the last. Conversations filled the room, overlapping and cheerful. Someone was giving a speech near the center, holding a glass in the air while others clapped. I recognized faces from every part of my family, along with friends I didn't know well but had seen before at other important events. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. I stayed near the edge of the room, holding the gift tightly. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy smiling, hugging, and celebrating something I had been deliberately kept away from. The noise felt distant, like I was underwater. My ears rang, and my chest felt tight, but I forced myself to breathe normally. Then Emma saw me. Her eyes widened, and for a brief second, her face went completely still. The excitement drained from her expression before she quickly replaced it with a stiff smile. That pause, that tiny moment of shock, said more than words ever could. She hadn't expected me. She hadn't wanted me there. People around her continued talking and laughing, unaware of what was happening. No one raised their voice. No one caused a scene. Yet the humiliation I felt was overwhelming. I was standing in a room full of people who mattered to me, and I had been excluded on purpose. Emma walked toward me slowly, as if buying time. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided my eyes. I handed her the gift without saying much. She took it, thanked me quietly, and glanced around to make sure no one was paying attention. In that moment, I understood the truth fully. This wasn't a misunderstanding or poor communication. It was a decision. The pain wasn't loud or dramatic, but it settled deep inside me. I felt small, misplaced, and painfully aware that I didn't belong there. I stayed only a few minutes longer, long enough to prove to myself that I had seen everything clearly. Then I turned and walked out, carrying a kind of hurt that doesn't fade quickly and never forgets. Emma didn't let me stand alone for long. She touched my arm lightly and asked me to follow her into the hallway, away from the noise. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp, like she was annoyed rather than surprised. She crossed her arms and lowered her voice so no one else could hear. "This wasn't meant to be awkward," she said. "I just wanted my day to be drama-free." The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply asked why she hadn't told me the truth. She sighed, looking past me instead of at me, as if I was already exhausting her. She said she didn't think it was a big deal and that I always made things emotional. Before I could respond, our parents appeared. They must have noticed we were gone too long. My mother asked what was going on, but her tone already sounded impatient. Emma spoke first. She said I had shown up uninvited and made things uncomfortable. She said she didn't want any negativity on such a happy day. I tried to explain myself. I said I was confused, that I had been told it was something small. I said it hurt to find out the truth this way. My words came out quietly, carefully chosen. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for understanding. Instead, my father shook his head and told me I was overreacting. My mother said I should be happy for my sister instead of focusing on myself. She reminded me that this wasn't about me. No one asked how I felt. No one apologized for lying to me or leaving me out. I stood there, listening, feeling something inside me slowly go numb. It became clear that they had already decided who was right. Emma stood between them, protected and supported, while I felt like an inconvenience that needed to be managed. I realized then that any more words would only make things worse. So I stopped talking. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight and my eyes burned. I forced a small smile and said I didn't want to cause any trouble. That seemed to satisfy them. I walked back into the room one last time. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. No one noticed that anything was wrong. I picked up my coat quietly and made my way to the door. Every step felt heavy, like I was leaving something behind that I wouldn't get back. Once outside, the air felt cold against my face. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, holding back tears. I didn't want to cry there. I wanted to leave with at least a little dignity intact. As I drove away, a painful truth settled in. This wasn't just about one event. It was about where I stood in my family and where I always had. I finally understood my place, and that understanding hurt more than any argument ever could.
In the weeks that followed, everything went back to normal for everyone else. No one brought up what had happened. No one checked in to see how I was doing. It was as if that day had never existed. Emma spoke to me like she always had, light and casual, skipping over anything uncomfortable. She never apologized. She never explained herself. She acted like nothing had gone wrong. Then the requests started coming. Emma called to ask if I could help look over some venue options. She asked if I could come with her to check decorations because she trusted my taste. My mother called and said it would mean a lot if I could help with invitations. My father asked if I could handle a few errands since I was good at organizing things. Every request was framed like a favor, like something I should be happy to do. What hurt wasn't just being asked to help. It was how easily they ignored everything I was feeling. No one asked if I was comfortable. No one acknowledged that I had been pushed aside. They only reached out when they needed something done, something handled, something smoothed over. I tried at first. I told myself helping might ease the tension. I thought maybe this was their way of including me now. But each time I showed up, I felt invisible again. Emma talked about her plans with excitement, laughing and dreaming out loud, never once pausing to consider how painful it was for me to be there after how everything began. If I went quiet, she didn't notice. If I looked tired, no one asked why. When I shared a small opinion, it was brushed aside unless it made things easier. I wasn't a sister in those moments. I was a tool. Someone useful, not someone valued. One evening, Emma called and asked if I could rearrange my schedule to help with last-minute details. I hesitated. For the first time, I didn't answer right away. She sounded annoyed and reminded me how stressful planning was for her. She said she needed support. The word stayed with me long after the call ended. Support. I thought about how easily they had dismissed me when I needed it. I thought about how my feelings were labeled as drama, while her comfort was treated as a priority. I realized then that this pattern wasn't going to change. It never had. That was my breaking point. Not anger. Not a fight. Just clarity. I finally understood that my place in this family depended on how useful I was. When I was helping, I was welcome. When I needed care, I was inconvenient. That truth hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped answering calls right away. I stopped volunteering my time. I began choosing myself, even though it felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable. For the first time, I wasn't trying to earn my place. I was stepping away from a role that had only ever taken from me. And deep down, I knew there was no going back from that realization. I didn't announce any decision. I didn't argue or explain myself. I simply pulled back. When messages came asking for help, I replied politely but briefly. Sometimes I said I was busy. Other times I didn't respond at all. I stopped offering solutions and stopped stepping in to fix things that were never my responsibility to begin with. At first, no one seemed to notice. Then the tone changed. My mother asked why I sounded distant. My father said I was being cold. Emma hinted that I was acting differently, like something was wrong with my attitude. I listened, but I didn't correct them. I had learned that explaining myself only gave them something to dismiss. Instead, I focused on my own life. I put more energy into my work, stayed late when it felt right, and took pride in what I was building for myself. I spent quiet evenings at home, catching up on things I had put off for years. For the first time in a long while, my time belonged to me. The space I created felt strange at first. Guilt crept in, telling me I was being selfish or unkind. Those thoughts had been trained into me over a lifetime. But each day I stayed silent, the guilt weakened. In its place grew something steadier. Respect for myself. My family didn't see it that way. To them, I was suddenly difficult. They whispered that I was holding a grudge. They said I was making things tense for no reason. Emma complained that I wasn't being supportive anymore. No one asked why I had changed. They only reacted to the fact that I no longer served the role they expected. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. For once, their opinions didn't define my choices. I showed up less, spoke less, and listened more. I watched how easily my absence unsettled them, and how quickly they labeled me the problem when I stopped giving. In that quiet distance, I found a kind of power I had never known before. I wasn't loud or dramatic. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was simply no longer available to be overlooked. Slowly, I felt myself standing straighter. I stopped waiting for approval that never came. I stopped measuring my worth by how helpful I was to others. My dignity returned in small, steady ways, through silence and space. They could call it attitude if they wanted. I knew the truth. I wasn't pulling away to hurt them. I was pulling back to protect myself. And for the first time, that choice felt strong instead of selfish.
Months passed with very little contact. Life became quieter, and in that quiet, I started to feel steady again. One afternoon, a plain envelope arrived in the mail with my name written neatly on the front. I knew what it was before I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. It was simple, almost rushed, with no personal note. My name wasn't handwritten. There was no message saying they hoped I could come. It felt formal and distant, like something sent out of obligation rather than care. I sat at the table and read it slowly. The date was close. Too close. It was clear I wasn't part of the original plan. I was added at the end, when someone must have realized how strange it would look if the bride's sister wasn't there. That realization stung, but it didn't surprise me. A few days later, Emma called. Her tone was lighter than it had been in months, almost friendly. She asked if I had received the invitation and said she hoped I could make it. Then, without pause, she started talking about how overwhelmed she was and how much she could use my help. She asked if I could assist with last-minute details, maybe help keep things organized on the day. She spoke like we were back to normal, like nothing had happened between us. There was no acknowledgement of the distance. No recognition of the hurt. As I listened, something inside me shifted. In the past, I would have felt torn, unsure of what to do. This time, I felt calm. I finally understood the pattern clearly. When things were smooth, I was invisible. When things became stressful, I was suddenly needed. That was when the emotional revenge began, even though it didn't look like revenge at all. I didn't raise my voice or accuse her of anything. I didn't remind her of the past. I simply paid attention to what was happening and chose myself. I told her I needed time to think. She sounded surprised, even a little offended, but she agreed. After the call ended, I placed the invitation back in the envelope and sat quietly for a long moment. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't trying to fix the situation or make anyone comfortable. I was deciding, carefully and deliberately, what was best for me. The power came from that pause, from knowing I didn't owe anyone an answer right away. The invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was a formality. And recognizing that truth gave me a strange sense of peace. I knew whatever I chose next would finally be on my terms, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of self-respect. I waited a few days before responding. When I did, I kept my message short and calm. I thanked them for the invitation and said I wouldn't be attending. There were no long explanations and no apologies. I didn't blame anyone or bring up the past. I simply wished them well and ended it there. The reaction came quickly. My mother called first, her voice tight with confusion. She asked why I would choose not to come and reminded me that family shows up for each other. I told her I understood, but my decision was final. She sounded hurt, maybe even embarrassed, and said people would ask questions. I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. Then my father reached out, saying I was being stubborn and making things harder than they needed to be. He suggested I rethink my choice for the sake of peace. I listened quietly and repeated that I wasn't changing my mind. That was the end of the conversation. Emma didn't call right away. When she finally did, her tone was sharp beneath the politeness. She asked if I realized how this would look. She said people would notice my absence. For the first time, I heard panic in her voice. Not sadness. Not regret. Just concern about appearances. I didn't argue with her. I didn't try to defend myself. I told her I hoped her day went beautifully and that I meant it. Then I said goodbye. Hanging up the phone, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. There was no rush of anger, no urge to explain myself further. I had said what needed to be said, and that was enough. The days leading up to the wedding were quiet. No more calls asking for help. No more messages checking in. My absence had already changed the dynamic. I wasn't part of the conversation anymore, and for once, that felt right. By choosing not to attend, I took control in a way I never had before. I wasn't asking for understanding or permission. I wasn't reacting to anyone else's behavior. I was acting for myself. I imagined the empty seat where I would have been. The questions people would ask. The looks exchanged. None of that was my problem. My silence said everything I couldn't put into words. This wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about getting even. It was about dignity. Walking away without cruelty or bitterness became my answer. And in that choice, I finally felt heard, even if no one ever said it out loud. Sitting quietly in my apartment weeks later, I finally had time to think about everything that had happened. At first, the hurt still lingered, a constant ache in the chest. But as I reflected, I began to understand something important. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. Sometimes it comes from people you love, from family who assume you will always accept less than you deserve. That realization was painful, but it also gave me clarity. I thought about all the moments when I had tried to fit in, to be helpful, to be the sister who always said yes. I remembered the parties, the dinners, the favors I had done quietly, hoping it would make me seen. And yet, time and again, my presence was only valued when it was useful, only noticed when it benefited someone else. That truth had been hard to face, but facing it was the first step toward freedom. The decision not to attend the wedding wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, and I didn't sabotage the day. My choice wasn't revenge in the loud, obvious sense. It was quieter, but far more powerful. By stepping away, I refused to be invisible any longer. I refused to let my value be measured by how much I served someone else's happiness. That simple act of self-respect changed everything for me. I also realized that reclaiming my worth doesn't require permission. No invitation, no approval, and no apology from others can define me. My life, my time, my feelings, they belong to me. I can choose where I spend them, who I let in, and what role I allow myself to play. That freedom, that control, was far more satisfying than being part of a celebration where I was only a shadow. Thinking back, I could see that every small act of quiet courage I had taken since that day was part of a larger pattern of growth. Pulling back, focusing on my career, protecting my peace, it all added up. I had built boundaries, and with them came confidence I hadn't known I could have. The hurt didn't disappear completely, but it no longer controlled me. In the end, the lesson was simple but powerful. Life may hurt you with betrayal, sometimes from those you love most. But strength isn't about retaliation. Strength is about knowing your worth, standing firm, and walking away when respect isn't offered. It's about creating a life where your presence is valued, not taken for granted. I smiled quietly to myself, thinking about the future. I didn't need their recognition to feel complete. I didn't need their invitations to exist fully in the world. For the first time, I understood that true power comes from self-respect, and no one can take that away. I had finally reclaimed my worth, and it felt like the most freeing gift of all.